At the height of his career, a young executive celebrates his success at an exclusive dinner party. But the party is interrupted by a little girl who stares at him and says, "Daddy, you live like a king, while my mother and I go hungry." He freezes on the spot, never having known of the girl's existence. His life changes in that very moment, and what he does will surprise you. If the story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The crystal chandeliers cast warm amber light across the private dining room of the Sterling House, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Michael Harrison loosened his tie slightly, his face flushed with champagne and triumph. Throughout the mahogany table, his colleagues from Caldwell Financial raised their glasses for the fourth time that evening, celebrating the multi-million-dollar deal he had just closed. At 28, Michael had become the youngest senior executive in the company's history, and tonight was his coronation. "To Michael," announced Richard Caldwell, the silver-haired CEO, his voice carrying the weight of decades in corporate America. "The golden boy who just made us all a little richer." Laughter rippled through the room as glasses clinked. Michael smiled. That practiced smile he had perfected over years of networking events and boardroom presentations. Everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was according to plan. His mother would be proud. The double doors of the private room suddenly swung open. A small figure darted inside before the startled hostess could react. The conversation died instantly. All eyes turned to the tiny intruder standing in the doorway. A girl no more than 4 years old, wearing a faded pink jacket over a dress that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled into uneven pigtails, and she clutched a worn stuffed bear to her chest. But it was her eyes that made Michael's breath catch. Those eyes, large, brown, intense, eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. The little girl scanned the room with surprising focus for someone so young, her gaze moving from face to face until it locked onto Michael. Without hesitation, she walked directly toward him, her small sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished hardwood floor. The executives watched in stunned silence, their champagne glasses frozen mid-air. She stopped in front of Michael's chair, looking up at him with an expression that seemed far too knowing for her age. When she spoke, her voice was clear and direct, cutting through the awkward silence like a knife. "You're my daddy," she said simply. "Mommy and me, we're hungry. We don't have food." The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Michael felt his collar tighten, though he hadn't touched it. His heart hammered against his ribs. The girl continued staring at him, waiting for a response, her small fingers gripping the stuffed bear tighter. "I think there's been a mistake," Michael managed, though his voice sounded hollow, even to his own ears. "Your name is Michael Harrison," the girl interrupted with the certainty of someone reciting a memorized fact. "Mommy's name is Sarah Mitchell. She showed me your picture in the newspaper. She said you used to love her. Sarah Mitchell." The name hit him like a physical blow. Michael's vision tunneled, the elegant room seeming to tilt sideways. Sarah. God, he hadn't heard that name in years. Hadn't let himself think about her, about the way her laugh sounded like summer, about the promises they had made in his cramped dorm room, about the future they had planned before his mother had intervened. Richard Caldwell cleared his throat pointedly. "Michael, perhaps you should handle this situation privately. Gentlemen, let's give our colleagues some space." The executives filed out in uncomfortable silence, avoiding eye contact with both Michael and the small girl who had crashed their celebration. Within minutes, the vast private dining room held only 2 people, a successful young executive in a $1,500 suit, and a 4-year-old child in scuffed sneakers. Michael crouched down to be at eye level with the girl. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just the eyes, it was the shape of her face, the set of her jaw, the way one eyebrow arched slightly higher than the other. He saw his own childhood photographs in her features, and something deep in his chest cracked open. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Emma," she replied. "Emma Mitchell. I'm 4.5. Mommy says I'm smart for my age. How did you get here, Emma? Does your mother know where you are?" Emma shook her head, her pigtails swinging. "I saw your picture in the paper that Mommy brings home from work. It said you were having a party here tonight. I took the bus. Mommy was at work. She doesn't know I left." "You took the bus? By yourself?" Michael felt panic rising in his throat. "Emma, that's very dangerous. You're just a little girl. I'm smart, Emma repeated stubbornly. I remembered the number. The 36 bus. Mommy takes it sometimes when we go to the library. Michael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he made when stressed, though he was usually better at hiding it. His mind raced through possibilities, calculations, memories. Sarah had been pregnant when they broke up. No, when he had broken up with her. On his mother's insistence, because Patricia Harrison had made it crystal clear that Sarah Mitchell, with her second-hand clothes and her part-time job at the campus bookstore, was not suitable for a Harrison. Because his mother had mapped out his entire future, and there was no room in it for a girl from the wrong side of town. He had convinced himself at the time that it was the right decision. The practical decision. Sarah would move on. He would move on. They were young. It wasn't meant to last, but she had been pregnant, and she had never told him. Or had she? The thought made his stomach clench. Had Sarah tried to reach him? Had there been calls he never received? Letters he never saw? His mother had controlled so much of his life back then, managing his schedule, screening his contacts, ensuring nothing interfered with his trajectory toward success. Are you hungry, Emma? Michael asked gently. Emma nodded, her brave facade cracking slightly. I had crackers yesterday. Mommy gives me her food, but she says she already ate. But I don't think she did. Michael felt something twist inside him, sharp and painful. He signaled to a hovering waiter who had been watching from a discreet distance. Can you bring us some food, please? Whatever's good for a child? Pasta, maybe. And some juice. As they waited, Emma climbed into one of the leather chairs, her legs swinging well above the floor. She set her stuffed bear on the table next to her, arranging it carefully so it could see the room. Michael sat beside her, unsure what to say, how to process this impossible situation. That's Mr. Buttons, Emma explained, patting the bear's head. Mommy made him for me from old clothes. He keeps the nightmares away. What kind of nightmares? Michael heard himself ask. Sometimes I dream about being cold, or about Mommy crying. She thinks I'm asleep, but I hear her sometimes. The food arrived, and Michael watched as Emma ate with the desperate focus of someone who wasn't sure when the next meal would come. She tried to be polite, tried to use her napkin properly, but hunger won out over manners. She devoured the pasta, the bread, the fruit that came with it. Michael ordered more, unable to bear the thought of this small person, this child who might be his daughter, going back to whatever situation had driven her to find him. Between bites, Emma talked. She told him about the place where she and her mother lived, though she called it the building with the broken windows. She talked about her favorite book, a tattered copy of a fairy tale that her mother read to her every night. She mentioned a man named Thomas who sometimes helped them, who brought groceries when things were really bad. Mommy used to go to college, Emma said proudly. She was going to be a teacher. But then I came and she had to leave. But she still teaches me things. She says education is important. That's why we go to the library every week, even when it's cold. Each word was another weight added to the crushing guilt that was building in Michael's chest. Sarah had given up her dreams. She had raised their child alone in poverty, while he had climbed corporate ladders and celebrated million-dollar deals. And he hadn't known. Or had he chosen not to know? The question gnawed at him. Emma, I need to take you home, Michael said finally. Your mother must be so worried about you. Will you come with me? Emma asked, her eyes hopeful. Will you meet Mommy? Will you help us? Michael hesitated. Every instinct told him to call a car service, have them take Emma home safely, then walk away from this complication. His life was perfect, ordered, successful. This child, this situation, it didn't fit into the carefully constructed world he had built. His mother had been right all along, hadn't she? Sarah would have held him back. But then Emma reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were so small, so trusting. And in that moment, looking into eyes that were mirrors of his own, Michael felt something shift inside him, something fundamental and irreversible. Yes, he heard himself say. Yes, I'll come with you. I'll meet your mother. And we'll figure this out. Emma's face lit up with a smile that cracked his heart wide open. She squeezed his hand tighter. I knew you would. I told Mommy that if I found you, you would help. She didn't believe me, but I knew. Michael paid the bill, left instructions for the hostess to apologize to Richard Caldwell, and followed a 4-year-old girl out into the Chicago night. As they walked toward the taxi stand, Emma's hand still in his, Michael realized that his life, the perfect life he had spent years constructing, was about to come apart. And for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't sure if that was a tragedy or a relief. The taxi driver gave them an odd look when Emma confidently gave him an address in a neighborhood Michael knew only by reputation. As they drove through the city, the buildings growing progressively more run down, the streets darker and emptier, Michael stared out the window and tried to prepare himself for what was coming. But nothing, he suspected, could truly prepare him for facing Sarah Mitchell again, for seeing what his choices had wrought, for looking into the eyes of the woman he had abandoned and realizing that she had been carrying his child all along. The taxi stopped at the corner of a street that looked like it had given up years ago. Broken streetlights cast uneven shadows across cracked sidewalks, a few figures huddled in doorways, and Michael could hear the distant wail of sirens. This was a part of Chicago he had driven past countless times, on his way to somewhere else, somewhere better, never really seeing it, never imagining that his own child might be living here. Emma climbed out of the taxi with practiced ease, thanking the driver politely as Michael paid the fare. She waited for him on the sidewalk, clutching Mr. Buttons, her small frame somehow both fragile and resilient in the dim light. When Michael joined her, she took his hand again naturally, as if they had been doing this all her life. "It's this way," she said, leading him down the street. "Mommy says we should always walk fast here and not talk to strangers. But you're not a stranger. You're my daddy." Michael's throat tightened at the word. Daddy. Such a simple word, carrying the weight of a responsibility he had never asked for, never prepared for, but was beginning to realize he could not escape. Did not want to escape, even though every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to run. They turned a corner and approached a building that looked condemned. Several windows were boarded up, others covered with plastic sheeting that flapped in the cold wind. The front door hung at an odd angle, and graffiti covered the lower walls. Michael felt anger rising hot and sharp in his chest. His daughter, his child, lived here? While he had been sleeping in his downtown luxury apartment, attending wine tastings and art gallery openings, Emma had been growing up in this. Emma led him through the broken door and up a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. The smell of mildew and something Michael couldn't quite identify hung heavy in the air. They climbed to the 3rd floor, where Emma stopped in front of a door that looked more solid than the others, with a shiny new deadbolt that seemed out of place in the decrepit building. "Mommy put that lock on," Emma explained, following his gaze. "She says it keeps us safe. She's very smart. She can fix almost anything." Emma produced a key from inside her jacket and unlocked the door. The apartment beyond was a single room, maybe 200 square feet, with a tiny bathroom visible through a partially open door. But what struck Michael immediately was how clean it was. Despite the water stains on the ceiling, despite the windows covered with cardboard and tape, despite the obvious poverty, everything was organized. A mattress on the floor had been made up neatly with a faded quilt. A few books were stacked carefully on an overturned crate. Clothes hung on hooks along one wall, all clean and neatly arranged. In the corner, a hot plate sat on another crate next to a small collection of mismatched dishes. The walls held the only decoration, drawings, dozens of them, clearly made by Emma's hand. Most showed simple scenes of daily life, a mother and daughter doing ordinary things. But one drawing, larger than the others and prominently displayed, showed 3 figures holding hands. A woman, a small girl, and a third figure that was just an outline with a question mark where the face should be. "That's our family," Emma explained, pointing at the drawing. "Mommy and me and you. I didn't know what you looked like when I drew it, but now I can fix it." Michael stood in the middle of that tiny, immaculate room and felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. This was where his choices had led. This was what his ambition, his obedience to his mother's plans, his cowardice had wrought. Sarah had been living here, raising their daughter here, while he had been congratulating himself on his success. "Mommy's at work," Emma said, checking a clock on the wall, a cheap digital thing that was nevertheless carefully placed where it could be easily seen. "She works at a place where people who don't have much money can eat. She serves them food. She says it's important work because everyone deserves to eat. She'll be home soon. Emma pulled out 2 cushions from under the mattress and arranged them on the floor. We can sit here and wait. Do you want to draw with me? Mommy and I always draw before bedtime. Michael lowered himself onto one of the cushions, his expensive suit feeling absurd in this setting. Emma handed him a stub of a crayon and a piece of paper that had been used on one side already. She began drawing with intense concentration, her tongue poking out slightly as she worked. What are you drawing? Michael asked, his voice hoarse. You, Emma said matter-of-factly. Now that I know what you look like, I can finish the family picture. What's your favorite color? I'll use that for your shirt. Blue, Michael said automatically. Dark blue. As Emma worked, Michael looked around the room with new eyes, seeing details he had missed before. There were educational posters on the walls, teaching basic math and spelling. A small collection of second-hand children's books. Flashcards for learning vocabulary. Despite everything, despite the poverty and struggle, Sarah was teaching Emma, nurturing her mind, giving her the foundation she needed. Mommy used to be in school to be a teacher, Emma said, not looking up from her drawing. She tells me about it sometimes. She learned about how kids learn things. She says I'm going to go to college someday, just like she was going to. She says education is the way to make our lives better. Your mother is right, Michael said quietly. Education is important. Did you go to college? Emma asked. Yes, Northwestern University. I studied business and finance. Is that where you met Mommy? Michael's hands clenched involuntarily. Yes, we were both students there. We were very young. And you were in love, Emma added, still focused on her drawing. Mommy said so. She said you used to read her poetry and take her to see the stars. She doesn't talk about you much, but sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep, I hear her looking at something and crying. I think it's pictures of you. Each word was a knife. Michael had romanticized their breakup over the years, convinced himself that Sarah had moved on easily, that she had understood his decision to prioritize his career. He had never imagined her crying over photographs, mourning what they had lost, what he had thrown away. Emma, Michael began, not sure what he was going to say, but the sound of footsteps on the stairs stopped him. Someone was coming, and based on the pattern of the steps, tired and slow, he knew it was Sarah. Emma jumped up, her drawing forgotten. That's Mommy. She ran to the door, unlocking it just as the person on the other side was fumbling with keys. The door opened, and Sarah Mitchell stepped into the room, then froze. For a long moment, nobody moved. Sarah stared at Michael, her face cycling through shock, recognition, fear, and something harder to name. She was older, naturally, but still beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the expensive maintenance of the women Michael usually encountered. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the uniform of a service worker, stained with the evidence of a long shift. Her face was pale, exhausted, but her eyes were the same, intelligent, intense, and in this moment guarded. Emma, Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled, go brush your teeth now. But Mommy, I brought... Now, Emma, please. There was something in Sarah's tone that made Emma obey immediately. She grabbed her toothbrush from a cup near the small sink in the bathroom and disappeared behind the door, though Michael suspected she was listening to every word. Sarah closed the front door and leaned against it, her arms crossed defensively. How dare you come here? How dare you show up in our lives after all this time? Sarah, I didn't know, Michael began. You didn't know? Sarah's laugh was bitter. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You didn't answer my calls. You returned my letters unopened. You had security escort me off campus when I came to find you. What? Michael stood up, genuine confusion on his face. Sarah, what are you talking about? You never called me. You never wrote. You just disappeared. I called you 23 times in 2 weeks, Sarah said, her voice rising. I sent you 7 letters. I went to your apartment, and the doorman said you'd left instructions not to let me up. I went to the business school and your mother was there, and she told me that you had made your choice, that I needed to accept it and move on with my life. My mother? The pieces were falling into place, a terrible picture emerging. My mother spoke to you. She did more than speak to me. She offered me money, $10,000 to go away and never contact you again. She said you had a future, a destiny, and I was just a distraction from the wrong side of the tracks. She said if I really loved you, I would let you go. Michael felt the room spinning. His mother, Patricia Harrison, with her meticulous plans and her absolute certainty about what was best for him. She had done this. She had intercepted Sarah's attempts to reach him. She had lied to both of them, and she had never told him, never hinted that Sarah had tried to contact him, that there had been letters and calls and desperate attempts to reach him. I didn't take the money, Sarah continued, her voice breaking slightly. I told her that you deserved to know you were going to be a father. She looked me in the eye and said that you already knew, that you just didn't want the baby or me. She said you had asked her to handle it to make me go away. That's not true, Michael said, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah, I swear to you, that's not true. I didn't know about the baby. I didn't know you tried to reach me. My mother, she controlled everything back then. My phone, my mail, my schedule. I thought you had just moved on. I thought I had made the right choice, the mature choice. The right choice? Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. The right choice would have been to be a man, to face your responsibilities, to not let your mother run your entire life. I was 19 years old, pregnant and alone. I had to drop out of school. I lost my scholarship. I worked 3 jobs while I was pregnant, just to keep a roof over my head. And you were at business school parties, probably not thinking about me at all. The bathroom door opened and Emma emerged, her face worried. She looked from her mother to Michael and back again. Are you fighting? Please don't fight. I don't like fighting. Sarah's expression softened immediately. She knelt down and pulled Emma into her arms. It's okay, sweetheart. We're just talking about grown-up things. But baby, you can't leave the apartment without telling me. You scared me so much. I came home and you were gone, and I didn't know where you were or if you were safe. I went to find Daddy, Emma said, her voice small. I saw his picture in the newspaper. I knew he could help us. I knew if he just knew about us, he would come. Sarah's face crumpled for a moment before she composed herself. She looked at Michael over Emma's head, and in her eyes he saw years of pain, of struggle, of doing everything alone. You need to leave, she said quietly. Please, just go. We've managed this long without you. We'll be fine. Sarah, please, let me help. Let me make this right. Make this right? Sarah stood up, still holding Emma's hand. You can't make this right, Michael. You can't show up 5 years later and fix everything. This is our life. It's hard, but it's ours. We don't need you coming in and disrupting everything just because you suddenly feel guilty. Michael looked at Emma, who was watching him with those eyes that were so like his own, and he knew he couldn't walk away. Not again. Not now that he knew. I'm not walking away this time, he said firmly. I don't know how to make this right yet, but I'm going to try. Emma is my daughter. And you, Sarah, you deserved better than what I gave you. What my mother did, what I allowed to happen, it's unforgivable. But I'm not leaving. Sarah studied him for a long moment, searching his face for something. It's too late for us, Michael. Whatever we had, whatever we could have been, that died a long time ago. And I can't let you hurt Emma the way you hurt me. If you walk away again, it will break her heart. Then I won't walk away, Michael said. I promise you, Sarah, I won't walk away. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat in his pristine downtown apartment, surrounded by expensive furniture and meaningless awards, and watched the sun rise over Lake Michigan. The view from his floor-to-ceiling windows had once made him feel successful, important. Now it just felt empty. Everything felt empty. At 8 in the morning, he called his assistant and cancelled all his meetings for the day. Then he got in his car and drove to Lincoln Park, to the house where he had grown up, where his mother still lived in the elegant Victorian mansion that had been in the Harrison family for 3 generations. Patricia Harrison was in her orchid greenhouse when Michael found her, wearing gardening gloves and carefully tending to her prized collection. She looked up with surprise when he entered, then smiled that cool, controlled smile she had perfected over years of charity galas and society functions. Michael, darling, what a lovely surprise. I wasn't expecting you until Sunday brunch. Is everything all right? How did the celebration dinner go last night? Richard called me this morning, said there was some sort of incident, but he was rather vague about the details. Michael stood in the doorway of the greenhouse, looking at the woman who had shaped his entire life, who had mapped out his future before he was old enough to have opinions about it. who had made him into exactly what she wanted him to be. And he felt something inside him break free, something that had been caged for too long. Why didn't you tell me Sarah was pregnant? Patricia's hands stilled on the orchid she was pruning. Her face remained composed, but something flickered in her eyes. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. Sarah came to you. She tried to reach me. She sent letters, made phone calls. She came to campus. And you made sure I never knew. You offered her money to go away. You told her I didn't want the baby. You lied to both of us. Patricia carefully set down her pruning shears and removed her gloves, taking her time composing her response. When she spoke, her voice was calm, reasonable. The voice she used when explaining difficult concepts to people she considered less intelligent than herself. I did what was necessary to protect your future. That girl was going to derail everything we had worked for. You were meant for great things, Michael. You still are. You couldn't throw away your education, your career, your entire life for some college romance that never would have lasted anyway. That girl? Michael's voice rose. Her name is Sarah, and that college romance resulted in a child. Your grandchild, a little girl named Emma, who has been living in poverty while you've been here tending your orchids. I made a choice, Patricia said firmly. A difficult choice, yes, but the right one. Look at yourself, Michael. Look at what you've become. Senior executive at 28, successful, respected, financially secure. Would you have any of that if you had stayed with her? If you had become a father at 23, thrown away your education, spent your 20s working minimum wage jobs trying to support a family? That should have been my choice to make, Michael said, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Not yours. You had no right to decide my life for me. You had no right to keep my daughter from me. I had every right, Patricia countered, her composure finally cracking. I'm your mother. Everything I did out of love. I sacrificed everything to give you the best education, the best opportunities. Your father left us with nothing but this house and a mountain of debt. I worked myself to exhaustion to pay for your schools, your tutors, your activities. I made sure you had everything you needed to succeed. And I wasn't going to watch you throw it all away for a girl from the South Side who probably got pregnant on purpose to trap you. How dare you? Michael's voice was cold. Sarah didn't trap anyone. And even if she had, that doesn't give you the right to play with people's lives like they're chess pieces. You manipulated us both. You lied, you intercepted communication. You drove away the woman I loved because she didn't fit into your perfect plan. The woman you loved. Patricia laughed bitterly. You were children playing at being in love. You would have resented her within a year. Resented the baby, resented giving up your dreams. I saved you from that resentment, Michael. I saved you from a life of mediocrity and regret. Michael walked deeper into the greenhouse, standing among the orchids that his mother loved more than she had ever seemed to love any person. You didn't save me from anything. You built me a cage and convinced me it was a kingdom. And I was so desperate for your approval, so terrified of disappointing you that I let you do it. But I'm done now. I'm done living the life you designed for me. Patricia's face paled. What are you saying? I'm saying I have a daughter. I have a 4-year-old child who lives in a place where no child should have to live. And I'm going to be there for her. I'm going to try to make up for 5 years of absence. I'm going to help Sarah, who has been raising our daughter alone while working jobs that barely keep them fed. And you, Mother, you're going to stay away from them unless and until I decide you've earned the right to be part of their lives. You're being ridiculous, Patricia said, though her voice shook slightly. This is just guilt talking. You'll calm down in a few days and realize that I did what was best. You can't just upend your entire life for a child you didn't even know existed until yesterday. Watch me, Michael said quietly. He turned to leave, then paused. You know what the saddest part is? Emma drew a picture of our family. She included you in it, even though she's never met you. She drew a grandmother because she imagined having one. Because Sarah probably told her that families have grandmothers who love their grandchildren. But you don't even want to know her, do you? She doesn't fit into your perfect world either. Patricia looked stricken for a moment, but then her face hardened again. If you do this, if you throw away everything we've built, don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. That's what will happen, Michael. You'll play at being a father for a few weeks, maybe a few months, but eventually you'll realize you don't belong in their world. You'll miss your life, your career, your accomplishments. And when you come back, when you realize I was right, I won't say I told you so. But I'll be here waiting to help you pick up the pieces. You're wrong, Michael said, but even if you're right, even if it does fall apart, at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have been a man instead of a coward. He walked out of the greenhouse, through the elegant house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum, and didn't look back. Behind him, he heard the sound of breaking pottery, his mother's careful composure finally shattering. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Not anymore. The next few days passed in a blur. Michael went to work but couldn't focus. Numbers swam on spreadsheets. Meetings became endless drones of meaningless words. His colleagues noticed, whispered in corners, exchanged concerned glances. Richard Caldwell called him into his office and asked with studied casualness if everything was all right at home. Michael said yes, knowing it was a lie, knowing his home had never felt more wrong. He called Sarah, but she didn't answer. He sent texts that went unreturned. Finally, desperate, he went back to that building with the broken windows, climbed those creaking stairs, and knocked on the door with the new deadbolt. Sarah answered, her face tired and wary. "I can't do this with you here all the time," she said before he could speak. "Emma is getting attached. She talks about you constantly. She drew a new picture where you're smiling. If you're going to leave, if this is just temporary, you need to tell me now so I can protect her." "I'm not leaving," Michael said. "I know I haven't given you any reason to trust me, but I meant what I said. I want to be part of Emma's life. I want to help." "Help how?" Sarah's voice was sharp with skepticism. "You're going to show up here once a week, play the hero for an hour, then go back to your penthouse. That's not help, Michael. That's making yourself feel better about abandoning us in the first place." "Then tell me what help looks like," Michael said. "Tell me what you need, what Emma needs." "I'll do it." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Emma needs stability. She needs to know that you're going to be there consistently, not just when it's convenient for you. She needs routine, predictability, and she needs to see that her parents can at least be civil to each other, even if we're not together." "We can do that," Michael said. "I can do that." "Can you?" Sarah challenged. "Can you really? Because being part of her life means showing up on Tuesday afternoons when you're tired from work. It means missing important meetings because she has a school event. It means putting someone else's needs before your career, your ambitions, your perfectly ordered life. Are you really ready for that?" Michael thought about the greenhouse, about his mother's orchids arranged in precise rows. He thought about his apartment, sterile and silent. He thought about the celebration dinner he had been so proud of, the $1 million deal that now seemed hollow. And he thought about Emma's drawing, the father figure with a question mark for a face that she wanted so desperately to fill in. "I don't know if I'm ready," Michael admitted, "but I want to try. Please, Sarah, let me try." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "She has a school presentation next Friday. 2 in the afternoon. She's talking about her family. If you're serious about this, be there. Don't make excuses. Don't send a gift or a card instead. Be there." "I'll be there," Michael promised. "We'll see," Sarah said, and gently closed the door. Michael stood in that hallway for a long moment, then walked back down the stairs and out into the Chicago afternoon. He had a week to figure out how to be a father, to figure out how to be the man Emma thought he was, the man Sarah needed him to be, the man he had never been taught to be by a mother who valued success over everything else. It seemed impossible. But then again, so did everything else about this new, terrifying, necessary reality he was stepping into. Friday afternoon found Michael standing outside Roosevelt Elementary School, checking his watch for the 10th time in as many minutes. He had left work at noon, ignoring Richard Caldwell's pointed questions about his recent absences. He had driven across the city to this neighborhood, where chain-link fences surrounded cracked playgrounds, and the school building showed its age in peeling paint and patched brickwork. But inside, through the windows, he could see bright posters and children's artwork, evidence that teachers were fighting against limited resources to create something good. Sarah was already there, standing near the entrance, wearing what was obviously her best outfit, a simple dress that had been carefully mended in places. She looked surprised to see him, though she tried to hide it. You came, she said, not quite a question, not quite a statement. I said I would, Michael replied. Emma's classroom was on the second floor, decorated with construction paper cutouts and student projects. Parents filled the small chairs meant for children, looking awkward and too large, smiling nervously at each other. Michael found himself next to Sarah, their knees almost touching, and he was suddenly aware of how long it had been since they had sat like this, side by side, united in something. Then Emma appeared at the front of the room. She wore a dress that Sarah had clearly sewn herself, and her hair was pulled back with ribbons. She held a poster board covered with drawings and photographs, and when she saw Michael sitting next to her mother, her entire face lit up. She waved enthusiastically, nearly dropping her poster, and several parents turned to look at the man who had inspired such joy. Today I'm going to talk about my family, Emma began, her voice clear and confident in the way of children who haven't yet learned to doubt themselves. This is my mommy. Her name is Sarah. She works very hard and she's the smartest person I know. She teaches me new words every day, and she makes the best pancakes even though we don't have a real stove. Just a hot plate. Sarah's cheeks colored slightly, but she kept her eyes on Emma, her expression encouraging. Emma continued, pointing to her drawings. Mommy used to go to college to be a teacher. She had to stop when I was born, but she says maybe someday she can go back. She says it's never too late to finish what you started. Michael felt those words like a physical blow. It had been 5 years, but Sarah still dreamed of finishing her degree, still hoped that somehow, despite everything, she could become what she had always wanted to be. And this is my daddy, Emma continued, pointing to a new drawing, clearly done in the last week. The figure now had a face, Michael's face rendered in crayon with the loving inaccuracy of a 4-year-old's hand. His name is Michael. I just met him, but he's very nice. He bought me dinner and he promised he wouldn't leave again. He has a big job with numbers and money, but he says the most important job is being my daddy. The words caught in Michael's throat. He hadn't said that, not exactly, but somehow Emma had heard it in his promises, in his presence, in the desperate sincerity with which he had pledged not to abandon her again. She had taken his fumbling attempts at connection and transformed them into something beautiful and simple. Being her father was his most important job. Emma finished her presentation with a drawing of all 3 of them together. No more question marks, just a complete family. The other parents clapped politely, and Emma returned to her seat, beaming. The presentations continued, but Michael barely heard them. He was thinking about that phrase. The most important job is being my daddy. After the presentations, there was juice and cookies, the universal language of school events. Emma dragged Michael around the classroom, showing him her artwork on the walls, her cubby with her name written in careful letters, her favorite books in the reading corner. She introduced him to her teacher, Mrs. Chen, who looked at him with a mixture of warmth and wariness, clearly protective of Emma and uncertain about this father who had suddenly appeared. Emma is a remarkable student, Mrs. Chen said, her accent carrying hints of her Chinese heritage. Very bright, very curious. She loves learning. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully, children need stability, Mr. Harrison. They need to know the adults in their lives are reliable. I understand, Michael said. I'm going to be reliable. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. I hope so. For Emma's sake. When the event ended, Michael walked Sarah and Emma to the bus stop. Emma held both their hands, swinging between them, chattering about her classmates and the next school project. At the bus stop, she suddenly looked up at Michael with those serious eyes that always undid him. Can we get ice cream? She asked. Just for a little bit, please. Sarah started to refuse, probably calculating the cost of ice cream against the week's budget. But Michael spoke first. I think that's a great idea. I saw a place a few blocks from here. Michael, we need to go home, Sarah began. Please, Mommy. Emma's face was so hopeful, so bright. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Michael and sighed. Just for a little while. I have to work tonight. The ice cream shop was a small local place, nothing fancy, but Emma approached the display case like it held treasures. She studied each flavor intensely, asking the patient teenager behind the counter questions about toppings and mix-ins. Finally, she chose vanilla with rainbow sprinkles, then looked worried. Is that okay? It's not too expensive? You can have whatever you want, Michael said. his heart breaking at the fact that a 4-year-old had to worry about the cost of ice cream. They sat at a small table, Emma working on her cone with careful precision, trying not to let any drip. Sarah had declined to order anything for herself, but Michael had bought her a cup anyway, remembering that she used to love mint chocolate chip. She didn't refuse it, which felt like a small victory. "Did you really mean what Emma said?" Sarah asked quietly, while Emma was distracted by a display of candy. "That being her father is your most important job." Michael met her eyes. "I'm starting to understand that it should be. I've spent my whole life thinking success meant titles and money and my mother's approval. But watching Emma up there today, talking about her family with so much pride, I realized I've been measuring success wrong this whole time." "That sounds nice," Sarah said, but her tone was guarded. "But words are easy, Michael. It's the follow-through that's hard. It's showing up when you're tired. It's being there when it's inconvenient. It's choosing her over everything else that seems important." "I know I have to prove it," Michael said. "I know words aren't enough. But I'm going to be there, Sarah, whatever it takes." Emma returned to the table, her face sticky with ice cream. "Can Daddy come home with us?" Sarah stiffened. "Emma, we talked about this. Daddy has his own home. But why can't he live with us? Families live together, don't they?" It was such a simple question, cutting to the heart of everything. Sarah looked at Michael, something complicated in her expression. Pain maybe, or regret, or just exhaustion with the whole situation. "Sometimes families live in different places," Sarah explained gently. "But that doesn't mean they're not a family. Right, Michael?" Michael nodded, though the answer felt inadequate. "That's right. But I'm going to visit a lot. As much as your mom says is okay." Emma seemed to accept this, though she looked disappointed. They finished their ice cream, and Michael walked them back to the bus stop. As they waited, Emma leaned against his leg and he found his hand automatically going to her hair, smoothing it gently. Such a small gesture, but it felt monumental. His daughter. His child. This small person who trusted him, despite having every reason not to. The bus arrived and Emma hugged him before climbing aboard. "Will you come again soon?" she asked. "Very soon," Michael promised. "Maybe we can go to the park tomorrow, if your mom says it's okay." Emma looked at Sarah hopefully. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow afternoon. 3 o'clock at Palmer Park. Don't be late." As the bus pulled away, Emma waved from the window until they turned the corner. Michael stood there long after it disappeared, feeling the ghost of her small weight against his leg, the trust in her eyes, the responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical thing. He went home to his apartment, but it felt wrong now. Too quiet, too empty, too much a monument to a life that seemed increasingly meaningless. He looked at his awards on the wall, his expensive furniture, his view of the lake. And he thought about that tiny room where Sarah and Emma lived, with its makeshift curtains and second-hand books and drawings on the walls. Which place, he wondered, was really the impoverished one? That night he did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out an old box from the back of his closet, the one box his mother hadn't been allowed to touch when he moved into this apartment. Inside were photographs from college, from the brief bright time when he had been young and in love and thought the future was infinite. There he was with Sarah at a campus protest, both of them laughing. There they were studying in the library, her head on his shoulder. There they were at a concert, his arm around her waist, both of them looking at the camera like they knew something the rest of the world didn't. He had thrown this away, all of it, because his mother had convinced him it was the right thing to do, the mature thing, the successful thing. And maybe in some ways she had been right. He had succeeded. He had money and prestige and everything that was supposed to matter. But looking at these photographs, remembering how it felt to love someone with that kind of certainty, he realized he had lost something far more valuable than anything he had gained. His phone rang. It was his mother. He let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times before finally leaving a message. Her voice was controlled, measured with just a hint of steel beneath the polite words. "Michael, darling, I think we should talk. I understand you're upset with me, and perhaps I could have handled things differently. But this obsession with this girl and her child isn't healthy. You're jeopardizing your career, your reputation, everything we've worked for. Call me. We need to discuss this rationally." Michael deleted the message without listening to it all the way through. There was nothing to discuss. He had spent his entire life being rational, being practical, doing what made sense on paper. And where had it gotten him? To an empty apartment, alone while somewhere across the city, his daughter was falling asleep in a room with water-stained ceilings, probably dreaming of a father who was finally, belatedly, trying to be worthy of her. The following weeks transformed Michael's life in ways he couldn't have imagined. He started showing up at Sarah's building regularly, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with his presence. He brought groceries that he pretended were on sale, though Sarah eyed him skeptically. He fixed the leaking sink that had been dripping for months. He sat on the floor with Emma and read books until his voice went hoarse, making different voices for each character until she giggled so hard she couldn't breathe. At work, his performance began to slip. He missed deadlines. He left meetings early. He turned down a major project that would have required travel to New York. Richard Caldwell called him in again, and this time the conversation was less friendly, more concerned. "Michael, I'm going to be direct with you," Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You're one of the most talented young executives I've ever worked with. But lately you're somewhere else. Your mind isn't here. Is there something going on we should discuss?" Michael thought about lying, about making excuses, about being the person everyone expected him to be. But he was tired of pretending. "I recently found out I have a daughter. I'm trying to be present in her life." Richard's eyebrows rose. "I see. That's certainly a significant development." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke more gently. "Michael, being a father is important, but so is providing for your family. You need to find balance. You can't let one completely overtake the other." "I'm trying," Michael said, "but I have 5 years to make up for. 5 years when I wasn't there, when I didn't even know she existed. I can't get that time back, but I can be there now." "At the expense of your career?" Richard asked. "Think carefully about this, Michael. These opportunities won't wait for you to figure out your personal life. The business world moves fast." Michael left that meeting knowing he was at a crossroads. He could keep trying to balance everything and failing at both. Or he could make a choice, a real choice about what mattered most. The problem was, he had spent his whole life being told what should matter. He wasn't sure he knew how to decide for himself, but Emma made the decision easier. He picked her up from school one afternoon, another ordinary moment that felt extraordinary to him, and she told him about a nightmare she'd had. "I dreamed that the walls fell down," she said, holding his hand tightly as they walked. "And there was rain coming in and Mummy was crying and I couldn't make it stop." Michael's heart constricted. Emma's nightmares were about the very real precariousness of her living situation, about walls that could literally fall down, about rain that came through the ceiling, about her mother's tears. What kind of father was he if he let his child live with that kind of fear? That night he started looking at houses, not apartments, houses, with yards and multiple bedrooms and solid roofs that didn't leak. He looked in neighborhoods that were safe, but not too far from Emma's school, places where a child could play outside without fear. He looked at properties that cost a fraction of what his downtown apartment had cost, but would be palaces compared to that single room with the water-stained ceiling. He found one 3 days later. A small bungalow in a working-class neighborhood, 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, windows that actually closed properly. It needed work. The kitchen was outdated. The bathroom tile was from the 1970s, but it was solid, safe, real. He made an offer that same day. When he told Sarah, she was standing in her doorway holding a bag of groceries he had brought, and her face cycled through confusion, disbelief and anger. "Absolutely not," she said flatly. "We're not taking charity from you." "It's not charity," Michael argued. "Emma is my daughter. I should have been supporting you both all along. This is just making up for lost time." "No," Sarah repeated firmly. "I have raised Emma for 5 years without your help. We've been fine. We don't need you to swoop in and rescue us." "Sarah, please. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to give Emma a safe place to live. A place where she doesn't have nightmares about the walls falling down. A place where you don't have to worry about broken windows and failing heat. This isn't about us. It's about her." Something in Sarah's face cracked at that. "You think I don't know my daughter lives in a terrible place? You think I don't lie awake at night worrying about it? I work as many hours as I can. I save every penny. But it's never enough. It's never enough to get us somewhere better. Then let me help, Michael said quietly, not as a way of buying your forgiveness or assuaging my guilt, though God knows I have plenty of that, but as Emma's father. Has someone who should have been doing this all along? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. If we do this, if we accept this, you can't use it as leverage. You can't hold it over our heads. And you can't disappear. Emma is already getting attached to you. If you leave now after making her think you're staying, it will break her heart. I'm not leaving, Michael said. I promise you, Sarah, I'm not leaving. The move happened on a Saturday. Michael had hired movers, but Sarah had so few possessions that they seemed unnecessary. Everything Emma and Sarah owned fit into a few boxes and bags. The furniture, what little there was, they left behind. Michael had already furnished the new house with simple, practical pieces. Nothing fancy, but everything functional and new. When Emma first saw the house, she stood in the doorway with her mouth open, clutching Mr. Buttons to her chest. "This is for us," she whispered. "Really for us?" "Really for you," Michael confirmed, kneeling down to her level. "You have your own bedroom. Want to see it?" Emma's room was small but bright, with windows that actually had curtains and a bed that was her own, not a corner of her mother's mattress. Michael had painted one wall with chalkboard paint so she could draw on it whenever she wanted. There was a small bookshelf, already filled with books he had carefully selected, age-appropriate but challenging, the kind that would nurture her obvious love of learning. Emma ran to the wall and started drawing immediately, her face alight with joy. Sarah stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, not even trying to hide them anymore. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I wish I didn't have to say that. I wish we didn't need this, but thank you." Over the following weeks, the house transformed from a structure into a home. Sarah proved to be resourceful and creative, making curtains from clearance fabric, arranging furniture to maximize space, adding small touches that made the place feel lived in and loved. Emma flourished. She slept better, ate better, played with an abandon that suggested she was finally feeling truly safe for the first time in her short life. Michael came by almost every day. He learned to cook simple meals, watching YouTube videos when Sarah was at work so he could surprise them with dinner. He fixed things around the house, learning basic home repair from online tutorials, taking pride in each small accomplishment. He read to Emma every chance he got, sprawled on the floor of her room while she pointed at pictures and asked endless questions. But his presence wasn't without complications. One evening, while Michael was in the kitchen helping Emma with a puzzle, there was a knock at the door. Sarah answered it, and Michael heard a man's voice, familiar and warm. "Brought some groceries. Also that book you were asking about at the library." Michael came to the doorway and saw a man in his early 30s, tall and lean, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He was holding 2 bags of groceries and a hardcover book. When he saw Michael, his expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Thomas," Sarah said, her voice slightly strained. "This is Michael, Emma's father." "Michael, this is Thomas Reeves. He's been a very good friend to us." Thomas, the name Emma had mentioned. The man who had brought them groceries when things were really bad, who had been there when Michael hadn't. The two men looked at each other, sizing each other up in that way men do when they're uncertain of their territory. "Heard about you," Thomas said, his tone neutral but not friendly. "Heard you were back in the picture." "I'm trying to be," Michael replied, equally careful. "Uncle Thomas," Emma ran past Michael and hugged Thomas's legs. "Guess what? I have my own room now. Want to see it?" "Sure thing, kiddo," Thomas said, his face softening immediately as he looked at Emma. He followed her down the hall, leaving Michael and Sarah alone in the kitchen. "He's been here for us," Sarah said quietly, almost defensively. "When we had nothing, when I was working double shifts and couldn't afford childcare, Thomas would come by and stay with Emma. He never asked for anything. He just helped." "I'm glad," Michael said, and he meant it, even though something twisted in his chest at the thought of another man reading bedtime stories to his daughter, fixing Sarah's sink, being the person Michael should have been. "I'm glad you had someone." Thomas emerged from Emma's room a few minutes later. "Nice setup," he said to Michael. "Big improvement from the old place." "Thank you," Michael said. "Emma deserves it," Thomas continued, his eyes hardening slightly. "She deserves a safe home, stability, people who are going to stick around." The implication was clear. Michael met his gaze steadily. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, Thomas said. We'll see, he turned to Sarah. I should go. Call me if you need anything. After Thomas left, Michael helped Emma finish her puzzle, while Sarah put away the groceries. The evening should have been peaceful, but there was a tension in the air now, an awareness of all the complications that came with trying to rebuild something that had been broken for so long. That night, after Emma was asleep and Sarah was getting ready for her evening shift at the restaurant, Michael stayed to tidy up the kitchen. Sarah found him there, washing dishes that didn't need washing, clearly stalling. You don't have to be jealous of Thomas, Sarah said abruptly. There's nothing romantic between us. He's just a friend. I'm not jealous, Michael lied. Or maybe I am, but not in the way you think. I'm jealous that he was here when I wasn't. That Emma knows him, trusts him, loves him. That you have someone you can rely on who isn't me. Sarah leaned against the counter, exhausted. Thomas has been a good friend. But he's not Emma's father, you are. And as much as I want to protect Emma from getting hurt, as much as I'm terrified you're going to leave again, I can see that you're trying. I see you here every day. I see how you look at her. I see that you're actually doing this. I am, Michael said. I'm doing this. Whatever it takes. The rain came suddenly that Tuesday afternoon. One of those Chicago downpours that turned streets into rivers and made everyone run for cover. Michael had taken the day off work, another absence that Richard Caldwell had noted with increasingly tight-lipped disapproval, to fix a gutter that had been coming loose from the house. He was balanced on a ladder, tools in hand, when he heard a car pull up. Thomas got out of an old Honda Civic, carrying grocery bags and moving with the confidence of someone who had made this trip many times before. He saw Michael on the ladder and stopped, something complicated crossing his face. Then he walked to the door and knocked, even though he probably had a key. Michael realized with a spike of irrational resentment. Sarah let him in, and Michael could hear their voices through the open window, warm and familiar. He focused on the gutter, on the physical task at hand, trying not to think about the easy way Thomas moved through this house that Michael was still trying to find his place in. 20 minutes later, Michael climbed down from the ladder, soaked and muddy. Thomas was still there, sitting at the kitchen table with Sarah, going through what looked like bills. Emma was at the table too, coloring industriously, occasionally looking up to show them her work. Michael stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how he must look, dripping on the floor, out of place in this domestic scene. Thomas looked up and something hardened in his expression. Sarah, I'm going to head out. Emma, be good for your mom. He kissed the top of Emma's head with an ease that made Michael's chest tight, then walked toward the door. Michael followed him outside. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and Thomas was heading to his car when Michael called out, "Can we talk?" Thomas turned, his expression guarded. "About what?" About all of this. About Sarah and Emma. About what you think is happening here." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. They stood in the small yard, rain soaking them both, and faced each other like fighters in a ring. But when Thomas spoke, his voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "You want to know what I think? I think you're playing at being a father. I think this is all very interesting and new for you right now, and you're caught up in the drama and the guilt. But I've seen men like you before. Rich guys who show up, make promises, buy things, and then disappear when reality gets hard. I'm not disappearing," Michael said. "Yeah? What about when Emma gets sick at 2 in the morning and won't stop crying? What about when she has a tantrum in the grocery store because she's tired and overwhelmed? What about when Sarah has to work a double shift and you have an important meeting? What about all the boring, hard, exhausting parts of being a parent that aren't photo opportunities?" "I'll be there," Michael insisted. "Will you?" Thomas's voice rose. "Because I was there. I was there when Emma had a fever of 104, and Sarah was sobbing because she couldn't afford to miss work, to take her to the doctor. I took her. I sat in that waiting room for 3 hours. I held Emma while they gave her shots and she screamed. Where were you?" "I didn't know," Michael began. "Exactly," Thomas interrupted. "You didn't know. You were living your perfect life, making your deals, impressing your bosses. And Sarah was here, working herself to exhaustion, trying to keep Emma fed and safe and happy. And when it got really bad, when she couldn't do it alone, I was here. Not because I wanted something from her, not because I felt guilty, but because they needed help and I could give it. I know, Michael said quietly. I know I wasn't there. I know I can't change that, but I'm here now. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough, Thomas said harshly. Emma isn't a project you can succeed at. She's a little girl who needs a father who's going to be there for her, consistently, even when it's inconvenient, even when it means giving up things you want. Can you do that? Michael thought about his apartment, gathering dust because he barely went there anymore. He thought about the projects he had turned down, the meetings he had missed, the disappointed phone calls from his mother that he no longer answered. He thought about the life he had built so carefully over years and how it was all crumbling because he was choosing to be here instead. I'm already doing that, Michael said. I'm already giving things up. My job is probably on the line. My mother won't speak to me. My entire life is changing. And you know what? I don't care. Because every time Emma hugs me, every time she calls me Dad, every time she shows me a drawing she made, I know this is what matters. Not the deals or the money or the approval I spent my whole life chasing. This being here. Being her father. Thomas looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, less combative. I loved her, you know, Sarah. Not in the way she loved you, not with that history and that intensity, but I cared about her. I wanted to be there for her. And she was always clear that she wasn't interested, that there was still someone else in her heart. You, the guy who left her pregnant and alone. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand how she could still love someone who had hurt her so badly. Michael felt those words like blows. She doesn't love me. Not anymore. How could she? That's something you should ask her, not me, Thomas said. But what I'm telling you is that I've watched her struggle for 5 years. I've seen her cry. I've seen her work herself sick. I've seen her give Emma everything and keep nothing for herself. And if you hurt her again, if you hurt that little girl, I don't care how rich you are or how important your family is. I will make sure you regret it. It wasn't a threat so much as a promise, stated calmly, matter-of-factly. Michael respected it. Fair enough, he said. Aditut, but I'm not going to hurt them. I'm going to be here. I'm going to keep being here. Thomas nodded slowly. Then maybe we can figure out how to both be here, because Emma needs all the people who love her. She needs a father who's present. And she needs the people who have been there for her all along. That doesn't have to be a competition. You're right, Michael said. It doesn't. They stood there in the rain for another moment, and something shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, but a kind of understanding. A recognition that they were both trying to do right by the same people, even if they came at it from different places. When they went back inside, Sarah looked between them with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Everything okay? Yeah, Thomas said, grabbing his keys. Everything's okay. I'll see you next week, Sarah. Emma, you keep being good, okay? After Thomas left, Emma looked up from her coloring. Did you and Uncle Thomas have a fight? We had a talk, Michael said, kneeling down next to her. Sometimes grown-ups need to talk about important things, but we're okay now. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She returned to her coloring and Michael sat next to her, helping her stay in the lines when she asked for it, marveling at how such a small person could have turned his entire world upside down. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Sarah found Michael in the kitchen, cleaning up from dinner. Thank you, she said quietly, for whatever you said to Thomas. He texted me. He said you might actually mean it about staying. I do mean it, Michael said. But he was right to question me. He's been here when I haven't. He's earned the right to be protective of you and Emma. Sarah leaned against the counter, looking exhausted, but somehow lighter than she had in weeks. This is strange, isn't it? This whole situation. You being here, Thomas accepting it. Me trying to figure out how to let you be part of Emma's life without being terrified you'll leave again. I'm terrified too, Michael admitted. I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll fail her, that I'll prove everyone right who said I couldn't do this. But I'm more terrified of not trying, of letting her grow up without me, of never knowing what we could have been together. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. Do you remember that night at Northwestern? We snuck onto the roof of the library. and you pointed out constellations to me. You made up stories about them because you didn't actually know the real mythology. Michael smiled despite himself. I remember. You figured out I was making it up and called me out on it. But you kept going anyway, Sarah continued. You said it didn't matter if the stories were real, as long as they meant something. That's when I knew I loved you. Not because you knew everything, but because you weren't afraid to be wrong if it meant making me happy. I was different then, Michael said. Or maybe I was more myself, before I let my mother shape me into what she thought I should be. You're still that person, Sarah said. I see him sometimes when you're reading to Emma, when you're teaching her something, when you look at her like she's the most important thing in the world. That's the Michael I fell in love with. Not the executive in the expensive suit, but the person who cares more about people than success. Michael looked at her, this woman he had loved and lost and found again in the most painful way possible. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. I don't know if you could ever forgive me, or if we could ever be more than co-parents. But I want you to know that not a day went by when I didn't think about you. I convinced myself I had made the right choice, that I had moved on, but you were always there in the back of my mind. The one that got away, except you didn't get away. I pushed you away. Michael, Sarah began, but he held up his hand. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I just needed you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. And finding out about Emma, as terrible as the circumstances were, it feels like a second chance. Not to fix what I broke between us, but to be the person I should have been all along. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I hated you for so long. I hated you with everything I had. But then Emma would do something, make a face or say something, and I would see you in her, and I couldn't hate you anymore. I had to find a way to forgive you, if not for your sake, then for hers, because she deserves better than to grow up in the shadow of her parents' pain. She does deserve better, Michael agreed. She deserves everything, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to her. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the ghosts of their past between them, and for the first time since Michael had reappeared in her life, Sarah looked at him without guards up, without walls between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. A beginning, perhaps, or at least the end of the worst of the hurt. 3 months into this new life, Michael received an email that should have filled him with excitement. A headhunter from London, representing a major international firm, was reaching out about a position that was essentially everything he had been working toward his entire career. Executive Vice President of European Operations, 7 figures, stock options, an apartment in Kensington. The kind of opportunity that came along once in a lifetime. He stared at the email for a long time, reading it over and over, feeling the pull of everything he had once wanted. This was the pinnacle, the achievement his mother had always told him he was destined for. This was what all those years of sacrifice had been building toward. And yet his first thought wasn't excitement. It was Emma asking him if he was going to leave again. He didn't mention it to anyone. Not Richard Caldwell, who would have pushed him to take it. Not his mother, who he still wasn't speaking to. Not Sarah, especially not Sarah. Instead, he saved the email in a folder and tried to pretend it didn't exist. But it gnawed at him. Late at night, when he should have been sleeping, he would think about it. The opportunity, the challenge, the validation of everything he had worked for. He could support Emma better from London, couldn't he? Send money for her education, or whatever she needed. Make sure she never had to worry about broken windows or water-stained ceilings ever again. Except he knew, deep in his gut, that money wasn't what Emma needed most from him. She needed his presence. His time, his attention. She needed a father who showed up, who kept promises, who was there for the small moments that made up a childhood. And he couldn't do that from London, no matter how much money he sent. The decision should have been easy. It wasn't. One Tuesday afternoon, he was reading to Emma when she interrupted him mid-sentence. "Daddy, are you sad?" "What? No, sweetie. I'm fine." "You look sad," Emma insisted with that uncanny perception children sometimes have. "Is it because of work? Mommy says you've been having trouble at work." Michael closed the book. "Work is complicated right now, but it's not your problem to worry about. But if you're sad, it is my problem, Emma said seriously, because you're my daddy and I love you. Those simple words hit him harder than any business pitch ever had. She loved him. This small person who had every reason not to, who had lived without him for the first 4 years of her life, loved him. And he was sitting here contemplating leaving her for a job in London. That night he stayed late after Emma went to bed. Sarah made tea, and they sat at the small kitchen table, a ritual they had fallen into over the past few months. They talked about Emma's progress in school, about the upcoming parent-teacher conference, about ordinary things that felt extraordinary because they were doing them together. "Can I ask you something?" Michael said finally. "Of course, and do you ever regret it? Keeping Emma? You could have had your degree by now. You could have had the life you planned. Do you ever wish things had been different?" Sarah looked at him with surprise, then understanding. "Is this about whatever has been bothering you lately? Whatever you're not telling me?" "I got a job offer," Michael admitted. "A really good one in London. It's everything I've been working toward. Everything my mother always said I should want." Sarah's face went carefully blank. "I see. I'm not taking it," Michael said quickly. "I'm not going. But I needed to tell someone. I needed to talk about it." "Why aren't you taking it?" Sarah asked, her voice neutral, giving nothing away. "Because Emma drew a picture last week. Our family holding hands under stars, and she asked me if I was going to travel for a long time. She already knew somehow that I was thinking about leaving. Kids know things. And I looked at that picture, and I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't be another person who promises to stay and then leaves." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, stirring her tea. "To answer your question, no. I don't regret keeping Emma. Every day is hard. Every day I'm exhausted and worried, and trying to figure out how to give her the life she deserves. But she's the best thing that ever happened to me. She made me stronger than I ever knew I could be. She gave me purpose when I thought I had lost everything." "I'm starting to understand that," Michael said. "This job, it would have been amazing 3 months ago. It would have been everything I wanted. But now when I think about it, all I can think about is missing Emma's school play, or her learning to ride a bike, or the way she says daddy when she's half asleep. I can't trade that for money and prestige. I can't do it." "What are you going to do instead?" Sarah asked. "You can't stay at your current job forever, not with how much you've been neglecting it." "I don't know yet," Michael admitted. "Maybe something that gives me more flexibility. Maybe something completely different. I have savings. I have time to figure it out. The important thing is being here, being present. Everything else is secondary." Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand just briefly. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing her, for choosing to stay." The next day, Michael wrote a polite email declining the London position. The headhunter called him, confused, trying to understand why anyone would turn down such an opportunity. Michael didn't try to explain. How could he make someone understand that the most important job he had wasn't one that came with a salary or a title? That being Emma's father, being present in her life, was worth more than any executive position. Richard Caldwell was less understanding. He called Michael into his office 2 weeks later, and this time there was no pretense of friendly concern. "I've been patient, Michael. I've given you space to deal with your personal situation. But this firm needs people who are committed, people who put their careers first. And frankly, you're not that person anymore." "You're right," Michael said calmly. "I'm not." Richard looked surprised. He had clearly expected an argument, a defense. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time for me to move on. Find something that fits better with my priorities now." "You're throwing away your career," Richard said, shaking his head. "You're throwing away everything you've worked for. And for what? A child you barely know?" "That child is my daughter," Michael said firmly. "And I know her better every day. I know her favorite color is purple. I know she's afraid of thunderstorms, but loves the sound of rain. I know she wants to be a teacher like her mother wanted to be. I know she draws when she's worried and sings when she's happy. And you're right, I am throwing away my career. This career anyway. But I'm not throwing away what matters." He cleaned out his office that afternoon. His colleagues watched with a mixture of confusion and pity. The golden boy who had fallen from grace. The executive who had thrown it all away for some kid. Michael didn't try to explain to them either. He just packed his awards and his personal items into a box and walked out of the building without looking back. That evening, he showed up at Sarah's house earlier than usual. Emma ran to him as soon as he came through the door. "Daddy, you're early. Can we go to the park?" "Absolutely," Michael said, scooping her up. "But first, I have something to tell you and your mom." They sat together in the living room, Emma on Michael's lap, Sarah watching with concern. "I left my job today," Michael said. "It wasn't making me happy anymore, and it was taking time away from you. So I'm going to find something else, something that lets me be here now." Emma looked worried. "But don't you need money? Mommy says people need jobs to have money." "I have some money saved," Michael assured her, "and I'll find another job eventually. But it's going to be different. Something that lets me take you to school sometimes. Something that lets me be at your school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Something that makes me happy. Will you still be able to take care of us?" Emma asked, her voice small. Michael hugged her tight. "I will always take care of you, always, I promise." Sarah looked shell-shocked. "Michael, you didn't have to do that. We're managing. You don't have to sacrifice your entire career for us." "It's not a sacrifice," Michael said. "It's a choice, the first real choice I've made for myself in years. And I choose this. I choose being here. I choose being her father over everything else." That night after Emma was asleep, Michael sat in her room watching her breathe, this small miracle who had turned his entire world upside down. He thought about the email in his inbox, the job offer he had declined. He thought about his empty office, his former life packed into a cardboard box. He thought about everything he had given up, and he felt nothing but relief, because Emma was here, safe and warm and loved, because he was here where he belonged, where he had always belonged if only he had been brave enough to choose it. Because sometimes the best decision wasn't the practical one, or the successful one, or the one everyone expected. Sometimes the best decision was simply to stay, to be present, to choose love over achievement, family over career, the small hand in yours over the corner office and the 7-figure salary. In her sleep, Emma shifted and murmured something that sounded like, "Daddy, stay." And Michael whispered back, "I'm staying. I'm always staying." He pulled the drawing from his pocket, the one Emma had made weeks ago of their family holding hands under stars. He had been carrying it with him, looking at it whenever he doubted his choices. Now he smoothed it out and pinned it to her wall, right next to all her other drawings. This was his life now. Not board meetings and stock options and his mother's approval, but this room, this child, this family, they were carefully, painfully, hopefully building together. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The letter arrived on a grey November morning, delivered by courier with Patricia Harrison's distinctive stationery. Sarah found it on the doorstep and brought it to Michael, who was making pancakes with Emma, teaching her to flip them without making a mess. He looked at the envelope and felt his stomach tighten. "What is it?" Sarah asked, seeing his expression. "My mother," Michael said. He almost threw it away unopened, but something stopped him. He set it on the counter and returned to the pancakes. Emma chattering happily about the funny shapes they were making. It wasn't until later, after Sarah left for her shift and Emma was down for a nap, that Michael opened the letter. His mother's handwriting was precise and controlled, just like everything else about her. "Michael," it began, "I have been doing a great deal of thinking these past months. Watching you walk away from everything we built together, watching you choose a life I don't understand, has been more painful than I can express, but I realize now that I have been selfish. I have been so focused on what I thought was best for you that I never considered what you actually needed. I know you won't believe this, but I only ever wanted you to be happy. I thought success would make you happy. I thought achievement and status and financial security would give you the life you deserved. I was wrong. I can see that now. I have a granddaughter I have never met, a little girl who shares my son's eyes and apparently his stubborn determination. I would very much like to meet her if you'll allow it. Not to interfere or to judge, but simply to know her, to be part of her life, if there's still room for a foolish old woman who made terrible mistakes out of love. I'm sorry, Michael. For everything, for controlling your life, for driving Sarah away, for keeping you from your daughter. I can't undo what I've done, but I would like the chance to do better. Your mother, Patricia." Michael read the letter 3 times, trying to detect manipulation, trying to find the angle, but all he found was something that sounded like genuine remorse. His mother, who never apologized, who never admitted being wrong, was asking for forgiveness. He showed the letter to Sarah that evening. She read it carefully, her expression unreadable. "What do you think?" she asked finally. "I don't know," Michael admitted. "Part of me wants to tell her it's too late, that she doesn't get to come into Emma's life now after everything she did. But another part of me thinks Emma deserves to know her grandmother, that everyone deserves a second chance. Even people who hurt us?" Sarah asked quietly. "Maybe especially them," Michael said. "If we can't forgive, if we can't move forward, we're just trapped in the past forever." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "It's your decision. She's your mother. But if you let her meet Emma, she needs to understand the rules. She doesn't get to undermine us. She doesn't get to try to control our lives. And if she hurts Emma even once, she's done." 2 weeks later, Patricia Harrison came to visit. She arrived precisely on time, carrying a bakery box and a carefully wrapped package. Michael opened the door and saw his mother for the first time in months. She looked older somehow, more fragile, though she was dressed as impeccably as ever. "Hello, Michael," she said softly. "Hello, Mother." They looked at each other for a moment, years of hurt and anger and complicated love between them. Then Emma appeared behind Michael, curious about their visitor. Patricia's face transformed when she saw her granddaughter. Something softened, something broke open. "You must be Emma," Patricia said, kneeling down with some difficulty, mindful of her expensive skirt. Emma nodded, suddenly shy, pressing against Michael's leg. "Are you my grandmother?" "I am," Patricia said, her voice catching. "I'm so sorry it took me so long to come see you." "That's okay," Emma said with a child's easy forgiveness. "Daddy says sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but they can still be sorry." Patricia's eyes filled with tears, and Michael realized he had never seen his mother cry before. Not when his father left. Not at his graduations. Not ever. "Your daddy is very wise," Patricia managed. "And you look just like him when he was your age." She opened the bakery box, revealing a carefully decorated cake. "I wasn't sure what kind you liked, so I got chocolate. Is that all right?" Emma's eyes went wide. "I love chocolate. Can we have some now?" Sarah, who had been watching from the doorway with arms crossed, softened slightly at Emma's excitement. "After dinner," she said. "But you can say thank you to your grandmother." "Thank you, Grandma," Emma said, then looked at Patricia uncertainly. "Is that what I should call you?" "You can call me whatever feels right," Patricia said. "Grandma is perfect." They had an awkward dinner, everyone trying too hard to be normal. But Emma, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, chatted away, telling Patricia about school and her friends and the book she was reading. Patricia listened with an attention Michael had never seen her give anyone, asking questions, genuinely interested. After dinner, while Emma showed Patricia her room and her drawings, Michael and Sarah cleaned up in the kitchen. "She seems sincere," Sarah admitted reluctantly. "But I'm still watching her." "Me too," Michael agreed. "But maybe she really has changed. Maybe losing me made her realize what matters." Over the following weeks, Patricia became a tentative but growing presence in their lives. She came for visits, always bringing something thoughtful but not ostentatious. Books for Emma, groceries that Sarah actually needed. Her approach was careful, respectful, asking permission rather than assuming. She offered to give Emma piano lessons, something she had taught Michael when he was young. And Sarah agreed after some consideration. The first piano lesson was in Patricia's Lincoln Park house, and Michael insisted on staying, protective and wary. But watching his mother's hands guide Emma's small fingers across the keys, listening to her patient encouragement, he saw something he had never seen before. His mother, teaching not to create another version of herself, but simply to share something she loved. "You're a natural," Patricia told Emma after the lesson. "Your fingers are strong. With practice, you could be very good. Will you teach me more?" Emma asked. "Can I come back next week?" "I would love that," Patricia said and meant it. But not everything was smooth. There were moments when Patricia's old habits emerged, when she made suggestions about Emma's education that sounded more like demands, when she implied that Sarah should be doing things differently. Each time, Michael or Sarah would gently but firmly push back, reminding her of the boundaries they had set. And to everyone's surprise, Patricia would apologize, adjust, try harder. I'm learning, she told Michael one afternoon when Emma was practicing scales in the next room. I spent so long thinking I knew what was best for everyone. But watching Emma, watching how happy she is, how loved, I realized that I was measuring success all wrong. She has everything that matters, even without the things I thought were essential. She has people who love her, Michael said. That's what matters. And a grandmother who is trying to be worthy of her, Patricia added quietly. Thank you for giving me this chance, Michael. I know I don't deserve it. But just as things were settling into a new normal, crisis struck. Michael got a call one Wednesday afternoon from Sarah, her voice tight with panic. Emma fell at school. She hit her head. They're taking her to the hospital. I'm on my way there now. Michael's heart stopped. I'm coming. Which hospital? He called Patricia on the way, not even thinking about it, just needing to tell someone. She answered immediately. I'm coming too, she said firmly. Tell me which hospital. Emma was in the emergency room when they arrived, Sarah beside her holding her hand. Emma's face was pale, a bandage on her forehead, but she was conscious and alert. Daddy! She called when she saw him, and he ran to her, gathering her carefully into his arms. I'm here, baby. I'm here. What happened? I fell off the monkey bars, Emma said, her voice small. My head hurts. The doctor came in, a young woman with kind eyes who explained that Emma likely had a mild concussion. They wanted to keep her for observation, make sure there were no complications. Sarah looked exhausted, terrified, barely holding herself together. Then Thomas arrived, having heard from Sarah. He brought books and a stuffed animal, something to keep Emma comfortable. Aunt Patricia came, elegant and composed but with worry etched on her face, carrying soup from Emma's favorite restaurant and blankets from home. For the next 12 hours, they all stayed. Michael and Sarah took turns sitting with Emma. Thomas made coffee runs and dealt with insurance paperwork. Patricia read to Emma when she was awake, her cultured voice gentle and soothing. They were an odd collection of people, bound together by love for this small person in the hospital bed. Around midnight, when Emma had finally fallen asleep and the doctors assured them she would be fine, they found themselves together in the waiting room, 4 people who shouldn't quite fit together but somehow did. Patricia had brought sandwiches, and they ate in exhausted silence. Thank you, Sarah said to all of them, for being here, for caring about her. She's easy to love, Thomas said simply. She's remarkable, Patricia added, like her mother. Sarah looked surprised at the compliment. Patricia continued, I was wrong about you. About so many things. You raised an extraordinary child under circumstances that would have broken most people. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I had help, Sarah said, glancing at Thomas. And now you have more help, Patricia said, if you'll accept it. I'm not trying to take over or fix things. I just want to be here. For Emma, for all of you. In that quiet hospital waiting room, something shifted. The walls came down a little further. The wounds began to heal a little more. They were becoming, slowly and imperfectly, a family. Not the family any of them had planned, but perhaps the family they all needed. Emma was released the next morning with instructions to rest and avoid strenuous activity. Michael carried her to the car, and Sarah fussed over getting her settled. Patricia followed them home and stayed to help, making soup and keeping Emma entertained with quiet activities. Thomas stopped by after work with Emma's homework from school and a new coloring book. And through it all, Emma smiled despite her headache, surrounded by people who loved her, secure in the knowledge that she was safe and valued, and never alone. Michael watched her with his mother, saw the gentle way Patricia adjusted Emma's pillow and the careful way she checked her temperature. This was the mother he had needed as a child, the one he had glimpsed in rare moments, but who had been buried under ambition and control. She was here now, emerging late but real, trying to be better. She's going to be okay, Sarah said quietly, standing next to Michael. Yeah, Michael agreed. We all are. Spring came to Chicago with sudden warmth, the kind that made people spill out onto sidewalks and remember what it felt like to be alive. Michael stood in the backyard of the little house, watching Emma chase butterflies through the grass that had finally turned green. She was wearing a sundress Sarah had made, her hair in braids, completely recovered from her hospital scare months ago. He had found new work, finally. Not at a corporate firm, but at a non-profit that helped low-income families access financial education and resources. The pay was a fraction of what he used to make, but the work felt meaningful in a way his old job never had. He helped people like Sarah had been, people trying to build better lives for their children against impossible odds. And every time he helped someone find stable housing or navigate a budget, he thought about the years Sarah had struggled alone and felt grateful he could make a difference for others. Sarah was inside, baking cookies with Patricia. The sight of them working together, laughing over some shared joke, still startled Michael sometimes. His mother had truly changed, had humbled herself in ways he never thought possible. She came over twice a week now, gave Emma piano lessons, and had even started contributing to a college fund for her granddaughter. But more than the practical help, she gave Emma something precious, unconditional love, the kind Michael had always craved from her and had only found once he had a daughter of his own. Thomas was coming over later for dinner, another Tuesday ritual they had established. He and Michael had developed an easy friendship, built on mutual respect and love for the same people. Thomas was dating someone now, a teacher from Emma's school, and seemed happier than Michael had ever seen him. He still checked on Sarah and Emma regularly, but he had stopped being the primary support system, allowing Michael to step into that role while remaining a beloved part of their extended family. "Daddy, look!" Emma called, holding up a flower she had picked. "Can we give this to Mommy?" Michael said, walking over to her. He knelt down in the grass, heedless of his jeans getting stained. "You know what? I was thinking maybe this weekend we could go to that lake we've been talking about. Pack a picnic, go swimming. What do you think?"
"Really?"
Emma's face lit up. "Can Uncle Thomas come? And Grandma?" "If they want to," Michael agreed. "We'll make it a family day." Emma hugged him tight and Michael closed his eyes, breathing in the smell of grass and sunshine and his daughter's shampoo. These moments, these ordinary beautiful moments, were what he had missed by being absent, were what he would have continued to miss if Emma hadn't been brave enough to find him, if Sarah hadn't been strong enough to let him try again, if he hadn't been desperate enough to change. The screen door opened, and Sarah came out carrying a plate of warm cookies. Emma ran to her immediately. "Mommy, Daddy says we can go to the lake this weekend." "Does he?" Sarah smiled at Michael over Emma's head. "That sounds wonderful." Patricia followed Sarah outside, looking remarkably at ease in casual clothes Michael never would have imagined her wearing. She had loosened up in so many ways, had let go of so much of the rigid control that had defined her. She was learning to just be, to exist in moments, without trying to orchestrate them. "The cookies are excellent," Patricia announced. Emma helped with the decorating. "She's very artistic." "She gets that from her mother," Michael said, and Sarah blushed slightly. They sat in the yard together, eating cookies and watching Emma play. The conversation was easy, comfortable, punctuated by laughter. Patricia told a story about Michael as a child that he pretended to be embarrassed about. Sarah shared an anecdote about Emma's latest school achievement. Emma brought them flowers and leaves and interesting rocks, each one a treasure that demanded appreciation. This was family, Michael realized. Not the polished, perfect image his mother had always tried to create. Not the nuclear family of television shows, but this messy, complicated, beautiful thing they had built together from the wreckage of mistakes and lost years. A grandmother trying to atone, a father learning to be present, a mother learning to trust, a friend who chose to stay, and at the center of it all, a little girl who had been brave enough to take a bus across Chicago to find the father she had never known. Later that evening, after Patricia had left and Emma was bathed and in her pajamas, they gathered in Emma's room for their nightly reading ritual. But tonight was special. Tonight, Sarah was going to read the last chapter of the book they had been working through for weeks, a story about a family that finds each other against all odds. Emma snuggled between them, her head on Michael's shoulder, her hand holding Sarah's. Michael looked at Sarah across their daughter's head, and something passed between them. Not romantic love, not the passionate intensity of their youth, but something perhaps more powerful. Partnership, respect, shared purpose. They were co-parents, yes, but also friends, allies in the project of raising this remarkable child. "Are you ready for the ending?" Sarah asked Emma. "Yes, but I don't want it to end," Emma said. "I love this story." "Stories have to end, sweetie," Sarah said gently. But that doesn't mean they stop mattering. The best stories stay with us forever. Sarah read the final chapter, her voice soft and steady. It was, as Emma had hoped, a happy ending. The family in the book found their way to each other, learned to forgive, learned to build something new from their pain. When Sarah closed the book, Emma sighed contentedly. "That's us," she said sleepily. "We're like them. We found each other." "We did," Michael agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "And we're never letting go again." He tucked Emma in, kissing her forehead, and stood to leave. But Emma grabbed his hand. "Daddy, are you happy now?" The question, so simple and so profound, stopped him. Was he happy? He thought about his old life, the apartment, the career, the success that had felt so hollow. He thought about everything he had given up, everything he had lost in order to be here. And he looked at this small person, his daughter, asking if he was happy. "I'm happier than I've ever been," he said truthfully. "Being your dad, it's the best thing I've ever done." Emma smiled, satisfied, and closed her eyes. "Good, because I'm happy too. And Mommy is happy. We're all happy together." Michael and Sarah left the room together, pulling the door almost closed but leaving a crack so Emma could see the hall light if she woke up. They stood in the hallway, both of them aware that something had shifted tonight, some final piece falling into place. "She's right, you know," Sarah said softly. "We are all happier now. Even with everything that happened, everything we went through, we're in a good place." "It's not perfect," Michael said. "Perfect is overrated," Sarah replied. "This is real. It's messy and complicated and sometimes hard. But it's real. And real is what Emma needs. What we all need." Michael nodded, understanding what she meant. They had built something authentic, had chosen presence over perfection, had prioritized love over the appearance of success. It was the opposite of everything his mother had taught him, everything he had believed for so long. And it was infinitely better. Over the following months, their little family continued to grow and evolve. Michael found himself at all of Emma's school events, cheering louder than anyone. He learned to braid hair and make elaborate Halloween costumes. He became the dad who always had snacks and band-aids and patient explanations for why the sky was blue or where babies came from. Sarah, with Michael's support and Patricia's encouragement, started taking online classes. Just 1 or 2 at first, working toward finishing her education degree. It would take years, but she was finally moving toward the dream she had set aside when Emma was born. And this time she wasn't doing it alone. Patricia became a fixture in their lives, a grandmother who had learned that love meant support, not control. She took Emma to museums and concerts, exposed her to art and music and culture, but always in conversation with Sarah and Michael, never trying to override their parenting. Thomas remained close, a beloved uncle figure who took Emma to baseball games and taught her to identify birds. He and his girlfriend were getting serious, talking about moving in together, building their own version of family. And at the center of everything was Emma, growing and thriving and becoming. She was 6 now, reading above her grade level, curious about everything, kind to everyone. She drew pictures of her family constantly, and now the pictures included everyone. Mommy and Daddy and Grandma Patricia, and Uncle Thomas, and sometimes even Thomas's girlfriend, Lisa. The family had expanded to hold everyone who loved her, everyone who chose to be present. One Saturday morning, Michael woke early and went to the kitchen to start breakfast. He had moved into a small apartment nearby, close enough to be available, but far enough to give Sarah and Emma their own space. They weren't a couple, he and Sarah, but they were a family. They had dinner together most nights. They made decisions about Emma together. They supported each other in ways that went beyond romantic love into something more fundamental, partnership. As he cracked eggs into a bowl, preparing to make Emma's favorite pancakes, he heard the front door open. Sarah had given him a key months ago, trusting him to come and go, to be part of the daily rhythms of Emma's life. Emma came running in, still in her pajamas, followed by Sarah carrying groceries. "Daddy's making pancakes," Emma announced unnecessarily. "Can I help?" "Always," Michael said, lifting her onto a stool so she could reach the counter. "You're the official pancake flipper." Sarah started putting away groceries, and they fell into an easy rhythm, the 3 of them moving around the kitchen like they had done this 1,000 times before. Which they had. This was their life now. This was their family. Later, after breakfast, they went to the park. Emma ran ahead, confident and fearless in the way children should be, knowing her parents were watching, knowing she was safe and loved. Michael and Sarah sat on a bench watching her play. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" Sarah asked. "If things had been different from the start? If your mother hadn't interfered? If we had raised Emma together from the beginning?" Michael considered the question. "Sometimes, but I try not to. We can't change the past. We can only work with what we have now." "You're right," Sarah agreed. "And what we have now, it's good. It's really good." "It is," Michael said. He watched Emma on the swings, pumping her legs, trying to go higher, and felt a surge of gratitude so intense it hurt. "I never thought I could be this happy. I never thought I could have something that mattered this much. You were so focused on the wrong things," Sarah said gently. "But you figured it out. You chose what mattered. That's what counts." That evening, back at the house, they had the family dinner they had planned. Patricia arrived with a homemade pie. Thomas brought his girlfriend and a board game. They crowded around the small table, laughing and talking over each other, Emma at the center of it all, beaming with joy. As Michael looked around the table at all these people who had come together for this child, for this family they were building, he thought about the man he used to be, the ambitious executive who measured success in money and status. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone he barely recognized. He had lost so much to become this person. His career, his mother's approval for a time, the future he had always imagined. But what he had gained was immeasurable. After dinner, after everyone had left, after Emma was asleep with Mr. Buttons tucked under her arm, Michael stood in her doorway one more time. He did this most nights, just watching her breathe, reminding himself that she was real, that this was real, that he hadn't lost it all again. Sarah appeared beside him. "She had a good day," she whispered. "She did," Michael agreed. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me try, for giving me a chance to be her father, for trusting me with her when I had given you every reason not to." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "You've earned that trust. Every day, you've shown up. You've kept your promises. You've proven that you're not the person who left. You're someone better. Someone who chose love over everything else that seemed important." They stood there together in comfortable silence, two people who had loved and lost and found their way back to something new. Not what they had planned, but perhaps something better. Something built on truth and presence, and the shared commitment to raising a child who knew she was loved. Michael thought about the night Emma had walked into that restaurant, a small girl with a stuffed bear and eyes like his own, calling him Daddy. He thought about how terrified he had been, how his whole world had tilted on its axis. He thought about all the choices he had made since then, all the things he had given up, all the ways his life had changed. And he wouldn't trade a single moment of it. Not for the corner office, not for the million-dollar deals, not for his mother's original approval, or the life he had thought he wanted. Because this small house with the yard, and the second-hand furniture and the drawings on the walls, this was what success actually looked like. Not the hollow achievements he had been taught to value, but the real, messy, beautiful work of being present, of loving without conditions, of showing up day after day and choosing what mattered. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like "love you," and Michael felt his heart expand with so much feeling he thought it might burst. This was his life now. Not the one he had planned, but the one he had chosen. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.